I'm Richard Haas, and I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to the Council on Foreign Relations. But I especially want to welcome Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and the entire Israeli delegation. Now, I'm well aware of the hazards of singling out some individuals and not others, but I was in time. In his first stint as Prime Minister, he signed the Hebron and Y agreements, and as Prime Minister and Finance Minister, he had a great deal to do with the introduction of significant economic reforms, reforms that have helped Israel grow and also weather the recent financial turbulence considerably better than most other countries. As you all know, the Prime Minister met President. There have been serious questions raised about the nature and the quality of the U.S.-Israeli relationship. There is the critical question of negotiating peace between Israel and Palestinians, Syria and Lebanon, as well as broader questions of Israel's relations with other Arab and Muslim countries, including Egypt, Jordan, and Turkey. And there is the challenge of what to do about Iran's ongoing enrichment of uranium and its apparent push for either nuclear weapons or the capability that would put them on that threshold of being able to produce nuclear weapons. Not surprisingly, these and related questions are central to our work here. No fewer than 10 Council on Foreign Relations scholars focus on one or another aspect of the Middle East. This guide providing background on the contemporary Middle East. We look forward to discussing all of these issues today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Richard, and thank you all for giving me the opportunity to spend some time. Delighted that I have a very robust delegation with me here today. Ambassador Michael Oren, Ambassador Gabriela Shalev, Ambassador Asi Sharif and Dani Carmon, and my own delegation from Israel, Dr. Uzi Arad and the rest who are here. Today we had a very good day in Washington. I said in the Oval Office that the reports of the demise of the U.S.-Israel special relationship are not only premature, but they're wrong. Now, they're wrong not simply because of the unbreakable bond between our two countries. It's a bond anchored in shared values, democracy being chief among them, in shared interests. It's a bond that transcends the differences of opinion our two governments may have from time to time. They're wrong because for the past year, most of those differences of opinions have focused on how to best move the peace process forward, but not about the goal of moving them forward. We sometimes disagree on how to best achieve the renewal of the peace process, but we share a fervent desire to do so as speedily as possible. So I think there's a much greater meeting of the minds between President Obama and me on how to move forward at this time, how to make the transition from proximity talks into direct talks, and how to ensure that those direct talks are as substantive as possible and as soon as possible. I think delay does not get us any benefit. I think delay in the process, talking about talking, making preconditions about getting into talks is a big mistake. I think it's cost us about a year, and I don't think it should cost us any more time. Both sides have grievances. We have grievances, too. For example, the Palestinians call public squares in honor of terrorists, including most recently. I could say, well, until they rename these squares, I won't get into the talks. That can cost us a lot of time. I think that the right thing to do is to move directly into peace talks as soon as possible. It's the only way that this thing is going to be resolved, and it needs a resolution. The substance of my vision for peace is a solution of two states for two peoples in which a demilitarized Palestinian state recognizes the Jewish state of Israel. This vision is anchored in two core principles: security and legitimacy. Security sounds obvious. It's been around as an issue for a long time, but the nature of the challenge of security has changed. When the Oslo talks began and launched the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks, there were two things that weren't present and have since loomed large. The first is the rise of Iran and its proxies, and the second is the rise of missile and rocket warfare. And these two new developments pose a significant problem for Israel. We are asked and are prepared to vacate territories for the sake of peace. We've just done that twice. Once in Lebanon, and the areas that we vacated were very quickly taken over by Iran's proxies, which poured rockets and missiles into them, which were later fired on us. The second time was in Gaza. We vacated every last inch of Gaza, and that area was quickly taken over by Iran's proxies. They poured missiles and rockets into them, and they were soon fired into Israel. 12,000 rockets and missiles in total on an area, I think, slightly smaller than New Jersey. Now, think about that. That's a real problem. Now, if we're going to have a third withdrawal, we must address the question of how to prevent this from recurring a third time. Strike one, strike two, third strike, you're out. In the case of Israel, it is a palpable strategic threat because our cities are targeted, our airfields are targeted, our military installations are targeted. We have to have a real solution to this, not a solution on paper, but a solution on the ground that actually prevents the mass smuggling of rockets, missiles, and other weaponry into the areas that we vacate. This is a significant challenge. I spent a great deal of time speaking to President Obama about it in a serious way. I think he understands the full seriousness of this challenge, and I think that we're committed, both of us, to try to find a realistic, concrete solution to this issue. Security, number one. Secondly, the question of legitimacy. I think the solution of legitimacy means that we recognize the Palestinian state as the nation state of the Palestinian people, and they recognize Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. There is an implication about their recognition of us. It is that they prepare their people and themselves, the leadership, for the idea that the conflict is actually over, that the Palestinian state is not a stepping stone to continue the conflict by other means, but it is an end to the conflict, an end to the claims of conflict. For example, the two most salient issues of legitimacy and ending the conflict revolve around the Palestinian refugees. Israel absorbs and has absorbed the Jewish refugees from the 1948 war and from other parts of the world. The Palestinians accept the Palestinians refugees, the Palestinian state. But equally, there are no demands, no irredentist demands of the Israel's Arab citizens. Their rights are fully guaranteed as individual rights, full civic equality in Israel, as is the case, and there are no demands for another separate state in the Galilee or in the Negev or autonomous regions. In other words, this issue is resolved here and now. Sadat, the late Egyptian president, said when he came to Jerusalem, he said, no more war, no more bloodshed. And what we expect President Mahmoud Abbas to say is no more conflict, no more claims, no more demands. Israelis are prepared to go a very long way, and I'm prepared to lead them, a very long way to make peace. But this has to be a real peace, secure, and an end to conflict. These are the two principal goals, or the two principal pillars of peace that I put forward in my speech in Bar Ilan. That was one of the things that we did. We also removed hundreds, many hundreds of roadblocks, checkpoints, earth ramps to facilitate movement in the Palestinian areas. There is a sort of an economic miracle in the Palestinian areas. Palestinian leadership has been doing important things there, but they would have come to naught if we hadn't changed the policies. Because you can't have a robust economic and commercial growth if you can't move goods and people. It's just impossible. And we facilitated that, and we changed it overnight. Not as a substitute for political peace, but as a facilitator. The economic peace that I've spoken about that has come to pass is a very good supporter